Okay, we good? All right, we'll call the meeting to order and start off with the roll call.
All right, very good. Chair Wertz.
Here.
Vice Chair Yant.
Here.
Tony Bevel.
I'm here.
Dorian Leibel.
Here.
Lisa Patterson. Here. Lori Zwingli.
Here.
And Diane Foster.
Here.
All right, great. Thank you.
All right, so approval of minutes. Does anybody have any comments, questions on the minutes? Anything that needs to be corrected? If not, we'll entertain a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
All right. With the motion seconded, anybody have any comments? All right, all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
And any opposed? All right. We'll move on to business. So first thing on the agenda is the April 28th meeting. Angie, was this one that we were considering canceling?
So in the event that Captain Carlson doesn't have his audio yet, so the April 28th meeting, we just wanted to let everybody know that that will hopefully, fingers crossed, be our first in-person meeting. So we can actually finally meet each other. We don't know all the details yet, but it will most likely be held at the City Hall Library Building in the City Council Chambers. So, but I'll be sending out an email to let everybody know for sure what the plan is. But just that's more or less what we wanted to go over, just to let everybody know. So we're looking forward to that.
That's great. Thank you.
Yes.
So can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I can see you, but you probably can't see me. I'm using my phone. My computer is not working, so I'm roughing it tonight.
All right, well, glad to have you.
Thanks. Thanks for your patience.
All right, so then next on the list, we got the capital improvement plan.
Good evening, Traffic Safety Committee. Julia Hyduk, and thank you, Angie, for not only adding me to the agenda, but adding me early to the agenda. So that's wonderful. I asked to be added to the agenda. As you guys know, we have our capital improvement program, and a lot of the projects that you guys are discussing are potentially larger projects, some of which are already on the CIP list, but not necessarily on the 1 or 5 year CIP. And so through the course of your deliberations, sometimes you sort of punt and say, we're not going to make a recommendation on this now because it's already on the CIP list, but we're going to come back as a group when the city is updating the CIP list, which is done annually as part of the budget process. So that's what I'm here for. I actually have a work session with the council on April 5th. We've got a preliminary CIP that staff internally has been putting together based on funds available and projects that are underway. Most of what we're doing is just continuing existing projects, but we want to make sure that we're able to bring forward your recommendations. And I did get from Angie sort of a summary reminder of things that you guys have discussed over the past few years to be either moved up or added to the CIP. And there's several projects that are related to Sunset and Woodhaven or Sunset and Timbrel. And the CIP has a project for Sunset and Timbrel for a roundabout. It's pretty expensive, and I think the question is whether or not that's really still relevant. Our TSP was done before the high school was even envisioned. And so what I'm recommending to you guys is that you recommend to the council to add funding for a study of Sunset, basically between 99 and Timbrel, to kind of look at the pedestrian needs and options and develop some more up-to-date and current options and alternatives that we could then potentially budget a project rather than piecemealing things together. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that. And then there was another project that I guess I need some clarification on, that was listed as 2 stop signs at Villa Road and Wildlife and Wild Haven, I think, if I'm saying that right. And I guess I'm a little confused because generally, Wildlife Haven and Railroad, and generally stop signs aren't a CIP project. So there must be something more to the project that isn't listed. And so I need to get some clarification on that. And just see if there's anything else that you wanted me to forward to the city council as a recommendation from the Traffic Safety Committee for potential CIP related projects.
Well, appreciate you coming forward and sharing that with us and giving us opportunity to provide feedback. Lisa, did you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I had a general question about the CIP update, and you were mentioning that the previous update was prior to the high school moving to the new location.
No, the TSP, the Transportation System Plan,
Okay.
was updated prior to the high school. The CIP, the Capital Improvement Program, is updated annually.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are there any other areas that you would recommend reviewing in that light with the high school location? And then as far as Sunset to Timbrel, I was curious if it's going to be a study, would it make sense maybe to go 99 to Pinehurst just to get a little bit more of a comprehensive look at that area?
Yeah, I was wondering that myself. So I think we could certainly do that to have a more comprehensive area. As far as we probably need to update our transportation system plan. When the high school came in, there was a lot of traffic analysis and study that went in associated with the high school, specifically and surrounding the high school. But, the reality of what's there now, it's like, so updating your transportation system plan to reflect kind of what really is happening and what the real needs are. But Bob, when was the last time we updated our TSP? It's been quite a while now at this point.
We updated our TSP in 2014, and it only included dealing with pedestrian connectivity issues. So it really didn't go through and reanalyze all the transportation items related to intersections, traffic flows, or anything like that. It only added areas of connectivity for pedestrians between identified major points within the community. The high school, the existing high school, the existing other schools, the downtown core area, the business area. So it was a very lightweight update. The next TSP update should be a complete rehash, starting from ground up and rebuild it. It's a major update. We need it. Otherwise, the information that we're dealing with as far as transportation items goes back to 2007.
We do have that in not next year's CIP, but I think the following year CIP to do that update, I believe, like in the 5-year CIP list, I believe. So I can make that modification for study of 99 to Pinehurst to review pedestrian safety, pedestrian connectivity, and make recommendations and provide some detailed alternatives and scope options that would really, I think, go to you guys and then recommendation ultimately to the city council for decision. And I'll have to work with Bob to get some costs on that, but I was just looking at the funds, and I think that we have funds that we could do something like that. And I think that would be a really good and appropriate first step rather than just sort of picking a project at an intersection to really look at it holistically on Sunset.
if the complete TSP update is a couple years out from starting, would it make sense just to wait for that so that it's, I mean, I know we're talking about expanding it even just a little bit to Pinehurst and 99, but if you do that effort and then a year later the TSP
Yeah.
starts, I suppose it could roll into the TSP, but would it make sense to just wait and incorporate it all together?
I mean, there's certainly, it makes some sense to wait. I guess that's really up to you guys and your recommendation. You're getting multiple comments, seems like on a fairly regular basis about Sunset and something. And so rather than taking no action for a couple of years, it might be good to look at that a little bit more. But and I think that, I mean, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if we did something like that, it would roll into and inform a TSP that is updated, correct?
Depends on what the project comes out of it. There's stopgap measures that could be incorporated into, a first level, basically getting us through the next several years until the TSP got fully completed and analyzed. That's probably your best bet for dealing with any of the issues that are coming up right now, particularly Sunset, Timbrel, crossings, things like that, is to do a stopgap measure. We're not going to do a full intersection redo, but something short of that is more possible, and it's not necessarily a throwaway item. And that's what I would say is that we would look at as far as being on tap for trying to come up with a solution, is a stopgap measure that will hold good for at least 2 to 3 years.
I had another question, if I may. At previous meetings, we also discussed the Safe Routes to School program and funding opportunities. And I'm curious, as part of maybe a larger effort, is that something that the city would think about taking on some kind of study, or would that again maybe be something that would be part of the TSP?
So that is generally done in collaboration with the school district, and the city is willing and ready to support the school district in that. While they were building while they were going through the new high school and the school transition projects, they were reluctant to really focus much time on anything other than that. And so we are actually starting to meet with Jim Rose, the chief operating officer, to talk more specifically about some safe route to school options, and that it really it requires coordination with the school itself and the school community and the city in order to establish projects and that. But I think we're starting to move in that direction a little bit more, so that's great. Some funding, so some of that, once we have a program, we have some projects identified for Safe Routes to School, then we could apply for funding through the state for Safe Routes to School. We also have it's called Safe Sidewalks. That's city funded. That's what your sidewalk fee is that you pay on your utility bills. And that's really intended to help with some of those sidewalk gaps. It's not currently, we don't have sufficient funds to do a major project right now. So we're kind of continuing to wait. We've got some projects in mind, but we have to wait until we have money to actually do them. But we can certainly work with the school district and identify some projects that we could apply for Safe Routes to School and potentially other CIP, transportation, SDC. There might be other things that we can do, but we need to identify those through the school district first.
So you're looking for us to provide feedback on anything related to the Timbrel Sunset study or the stop sign?
Yeah, those are the ones that Angie indicated to me based on kind of your your sheet that you guys have of complaints and actions and what you've closed out that were essentially closed because it's a CIP related thing. And I guess mainly I want to make sure I haven't missed something on that list, or that, between her and I, there hasn't been anything missed that you guys were expecting us to move forward into the CIP process. But it looks like, there's one that's flashing crosswalk sign at Sunset and Timberwolf, that's 20003. And then, she highlighted it for me and I don't have my little highlight. Oh, here it is. Yeah, 2023 was a Sunset and Timberwolf. 20003 was flashing crosswalk sign at Sunset and Timberwolf. 20008 was someone requested a blinking yellow LED light for pedestrians at Sunset and Woodhaven. And then there was 2021-008 safety concerns for intersection at Sunset and Timberwolf, with some suggestions. And so it seems like there have been several items at Timberwolf and Sunset and other things where you guys have gotten complaints, but really not been able to do much because it's not a project with really within your purview. It's really a capital improvement project. And so you've closed it, but made note that you're going to recommend doing something through the CIP. And I think that my recommendation in how to address that is let's study it a little bit more and figure out what that something really should be for that. And then the only other thing that was highlighted was the request for 2 additional stop signs at Villa, Wildlife Haven, and Railroad. And I need clarification on what that means.
Well, why don't we tackle the first one first?
Sure.
Because that one, I think is fresh in everybody's mind. So I'm just trying to think of the appropriate steps you'd want from us. So essentially, we've got several items that have come forward over the last, couple of years, 2-3 years, that have had us recommending projects either be put on the CIP or be recommended to be advanced in the CIP. And so you're looking for us to maybe give you a motion that recommends that a study be done to identify what that project may be in the future.
Yes.
In relation to those issues that have been brought forth.
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments, or would anybody like to make a motion like that?
Just a quick question. So in some of the information though that we're learning tonight from Bob in his Timberwolf and Sunset information, again, that he's presenting later on the agenda, I mean, would maybe hearing more about, I know that the attachments are in here, but would hearing more about his findings help with this conversation at all? Or, because it seems related to this conversation and what sort of our next steps would be in that decision after sort of his initial finding just on the Timberwolf area on Sunset.
I'm open to waiting till the end to do this, if that makes sense.
Well, or I wasn't sure for Julia, since we were, we had her at the front of the agenda. Could we also talk about it? Maybe, I don't know, could we pull it out of order so that she could listen to that portion of it? Or it's up to you how you want to do it in order, but it probably would make sense maybe for us to listen to Bob's analysis of the information that he found.
Yeah, and I'm happy to wait. Like I said, I was pleased to be at the front of the agenda, but I was going to sit and listen to the rest of the meeting anyways. So I'm certainly happy to wait. And there might be other things. I know that there's some other citizen comments that that you might be hearing too, that might play into kind of what you ultimately want to recommend. So I think, I'm fine waiting if that's the will of the committee.
Well, maybe we could just move that. I don't want to cause any problems, but maybe we could just move that item to the top of the update list. And following the update on that traffic count item, we can address this CIP item. Does that seem like that works for folks? Is that okay to do that, Angie? Can we shift things around?
Absolutely, feel free.
Okay.
That makes sense, yeah.
Okay, so before we do that, the other item that I don't think we're getting an update on in later is the stop signs at Wildlife Haven. And to be honest, I was looking at that. It looks like that was a couple of years ago. And I honestly, I don't remember. I remember the issue. I don't remember the conversations around us making the recommendation to put that on the CIP. I don't know if anybody else has a better memory of that than I do.
Yeah, and this was on we did forward this to council at last CIP as sort of, so last year we forwarded everything to council and said, here's the CIP projects, here's what TSC has said. But that didn't get on the list, and I'm not sure, honestly, I don't remember why or whether or not there was really any discussion of that. But again, and maybe we just need to dig back through that original actual request to see what it was, because again, I don't think stop signs in and of themselves would be something that would be added to a CIP list. So there must be something more to it.
This is the Road Street intersection down on downtown.
I don't know.
I believe it was. And they wanted stop signs, they wanted lighting. The configuration of that intersection is really bad. It's really, what it needs to be is completely rebuilt.
So
And
that's
why
probably
it's
what
more
was
of a
recommended.
CIP project than just putting up stop signs, because
Okay.
that doesn't fix the problem. And you're talking about something that's close to $500,000 project. That's why it was taken off and said, well, let's forward it as a CIP project.
Gotcha.
The standard, throw stop signs at it, it's not going to work for that. It doesn't fix the issue.
It's the one by the path that goes down to the park, right?
Right.
Okay, that's actually helpful, because I think I can just, say, I just didn't, forwarding it as that doesn't really make any sense, but I think I can say to the council that, the TSC identified that really what the solution needs to be is a reconfiguration of the intersection, and then adding that to the CIP list. It may not be a high priority on the CIP list, but at least we can get it on there as a project.
Can't get any funding for it unless it is
Right.
on the CIP. So put it on there, get it put on, and then we'll take it up as we get funds.
Would this be an appropriate one that initially you just started out as a study also? Because it kind of
I'm not
seems like,
sure what a study's going to find. I think the intersection configuration, just as it stands by itself, doesn't meet any type of acceptable standards, even for a residential street connection.
yeah, if it turns into a $500,000 project, just, I guess, prioritizing that may, in my opinion, be pretty far down the list compared to
But
other
at least it's
projects.
on the list.
No, but I understand what Jason is saying is maybe we need to look at it a little bit more to see how warranted something is, and the pros and cons of if reconfiguring it is a $500,000 project, that may be a valid project, but it may not be that necessary. And so trying to I think for you guys, when you're making recommendations to the council for the CIP list, you should be thinking about what are the priority projects that you think need to be forwarded, not just every project that comes to you. It should be the projects that you think are really critically important that should be added to the CIP list, right?
Right.
So, and I don't remember on that one. Bob, do you think that there's any sense in doing a study to determine whether or not there's I mean, obviously the intersection needs to be reconfigured for the best, best practices or whatever. But do you think that a study to determine whether or not it's desperately needed or just needed would be appropriate?
I think if you're saying, does it meet standard configuration standards for the city? No. Is there been a safety issue related to it? Captain Carlson, as I remember, did not have any data that showed that any accidents had occurred down there. So as far as a priority for safety, I think we'd have to go back and look at that through the police department records to say if there's anything there that would kick it up. But based on just trying to meet the standards and a single complaint doesn't really come up high on the list of things to compare it to that need the work. A low volume road, low volume intersection road to a low volume intersection.
Would that be something that when we do a TSP update would potentially come out?
Local to local, not really.
Okay.
That's something that, like I said, is if we have it on there, we've identified it, we put it on there, but it's got a low rating for compared to other projects. We'll get to it as things happen, but I don't believe that based on merit of either being a safety issue, number one, it doesn't have anything backing it up, then there's no support for it there. And meeting a standard, that is a kind of a hard one to throw in the mix compared to other projects that are basically needed for commuter traffic, people getting around the city versus just a local intersection. You've been dealing with it for almost 20 years. Can we make it more convenient? I don't know. That's something we could look at. Maybe some better lighting down there would help. But the configuration of that intersection, the way it's set up, it does need to be rebuilt. But has it created a safety issue overall? None that I know of, based on what I've discussed with Captain Carlson, which is usually the starting point.
Okay, so I'm not really sure where we're at with that. I don't know that, I guess I don't know that we're ready. I don't know that I personally am ready to recommend a big project to be put on the CIP for it. But maybe, I don't know, it kind of feels like maybe this needs to be revisited since it was something that we previously had requested that. I can't remember if we closed this agenda item previously, but
It looks like it is closed. And
I did find for reference, this was before my time on the board, but I did find for reference, it looks like there's quite a bit of commentary on this item in the September 2020 minutes. So just for future referring back to it, it looks like that's where sort of the commentary from this topic landed.
so in order to proceed forward with your CIP budgeting process, do you need something from us today or can next month? If you need that, is that too late?
it's too late. Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, it's not too late. It's sort of too late. So I have to get my CIP draft to finance to incorporate into the budget. Ultimately, it's part of the budget process. And so there are opportunities through the budget process to make modifications, but it would be really hard to add a significant project. It wouldn't necessarily be hard to add a project to like the 5-year CIP. But to add it to like the 1-year CIP might be harder, which that's not really what we're talking about anyway. So,
I personally don't feel like it's
Yeah.
as big of an importance level to be making sure it's on next year's CIP, but I don't know how everybody else feels.
I'm curious, for in the CIP project list, it sounds like in our 5-year, there's a TSP update slated for a few years out. Can we maybe set aside funding to do a smaller scale study each year for the smaller projects that's not location specific, but with the knowledge that there will likely be some intersections or locations we'll want to study each year. And so just kind of set aside funding for that.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm suggesting with the Sunset Timbrel piece is kind of like, okay, let's do that. And there is some funds through the traffic safety, traffic calming, but it's really more intended for doing some small things. But these are what we're talking about here are the bigger ticket items. But yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense to kind of earmark a certain amount of money for those studies, because there's only so much that Bob and his traffic counter analysis can do. I think there's certainly some times where we need to step it up and have our traffic consultant assist us in some, just, you know, even evaluating like what's the best alternative. You know, just because something's in the transportation system plan doesn't mean that that's the right option now. And so having a little bit more analysis for these types of things, having a little bit more analysis seems appropriate.
So what are we thinking? I guess are we as a group, are we okay with just letting this one on B, not making a motion or a decision tonight on it and just letting it run its course?
Can we have a quick summary actually of where we are, just to confirm what's been discussed to date? Because I feel like we've talked about a lot of different things, and I'm not sure exactly what we aren't proposing or making a motion on.
So what I am asking of you guys is your input and support on what you as a group are recommending be added or thought about as part of the CIP process. So that may mean the 1-year CIP, which would be budgeted for next year, or the 5-year CIP, or even potentially be a project beyond that. Of the things that you guys have discussed since your inception, as I understand it, there are about 5 projects that you guys have closed with the knowledge, thought, or whatever, that it's going to either it already is on the CIP and you're recommending it be moved up, or you want to add it to the CIP. And so I guess what I'm really looking for is that confirmation on those projects that those are the projects that you noted, and that we're not missing something.
So I wonder, could we put something in writing, like summarize those projects that we have requested be on the CIP or continue to stay on the CIP, either 1-year or 5-year, and then add in the request for the study to be done on Sunset, and potentially even just like an annual traffic study allotment for the TSC beyond what our city staff team can assess.
Yeah, I mean, and that's perfectly fine. I can, and that basically that's what I did last year, is just forward. Here's the things that the traffic safety committee said they wanted on there. But there wasn't a lot of detail, and I hadn't actually taken it to you guys to make sure I got it right, and nothing, the counts, nothing changed. So I just kind of, and I had promised last year that I was going to try to do it better this year, and come to you guys and let you know about the CIP process and give you an opportunity to, like, check or validate what we were putting forward. So that's kind of what I'm doing. But I absolutely can just say, here's what the Traffic Safety Committee has done. Here's the recommendations. And that's perfectly fine. It's really up to you. I want to just make sure that you have a voice mechanism in that CIP process.
Would it be the working session with the council, is that open to the public, and or would somebody from our committee potentially be able to attend? And that way we'd have the memo written up potentially, but also then be there to kind of, if there are any questions that arose.
Yeah, it is open to the public. All work sessions are, all city meetings are open to the public. It will be in person. And yeah, that would be great if there is somebody that from the committee that could be there, just in the event that there is a question. Generally, it's generally not interactive unless it's a joint work session, but certainly if there's somebody that is there and there's a question and they can answer it, that would be great.
I think it would be great to be more involved in the CIP planning, 1 5-year planning. I think it seems like it's a little bit too late to really have much more input beyond the items that you brought up today at this stage in the game for where you're at with this next year's budgeting cycle. But maybe that's something in the future that we could have an agenda item where we discuss the CIP list, the draft list, or brainstorm other ideas that just us as a group feel is or could be important to the city.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like maybe it's a little too late for that. So if we focus on the items that we've previously asked to be put on the CIP, which one we're going to discuss here in a little bit more detail, which is all the ones along Sunset. And then the other one is this one with the reconfiguration of the intersection or stop signs or something at Wildlife Haven. So I think at this point, if we can just come to an agreement or a decision on the improvements that we had previously recommended going to being put on the CIP list for the improvements at Wildlife Haven, I think that would be, I think it'd be good if we could try and settle that. And so without doing anything, we've recommended that be put on the CIP list. So I guess I don't know that we need to do anything unless we want to change that. But it sounds like maybe we would want to revise that to be a little softer, that it's just a study, or just have somebody look at that intersection. I don't even know if that is a CIP project. I don't know. I guess we just need a little bit more guidance for what you would recommend, or if somebody else on the committee here has a suggestion for how we can move on.
Yeah, as it is, I mean, that it is, that is the recommendation, is that it be added to the CIP list. But I think what we're hearing from Bob is that it's really more of a reconfiguration of the intersection. And maybe it's, I don't know, Bob. I mean, it doesn't seem like the reconfiguration of the intersection necessarily is automatically a CIP project. So what do you have a recommendation of how to kind of move this onto something without being the full project?
Only if there was a safety issue, and that would have been brought up by information that the PD would have provided. If there's a safety issue, I can deal with it. If it's just, it doesn't meet standards and there's no safety issue, then no, not to my knowledge. We have put projects on based on the directive from city council and people's feedback, and the council basically making it so. That usually gets it on the CIP. which allows us to use funds from the transportation system for that. Sans that, I don't have anything that I know of.
And without any more information or study, I doubt that this is ever going to rise to a level where we're going to move it to funding. If it's local to local and not a safety issue, I don't know where, you know, where that would raise to a priority. But again, I can just forward it, and council could do it, you know, could choose to not put it on, or they could just put it on and it never becomes a priority to be funded, or we can drop it. And I'm sorry, I know you guys are sort of looking for, you know, like some guidance here, but I mean, those are really the options, is that this is, you've closed it based on this recommendation. So we can just continue with that. Or you could change your recommendation, I guess.
Mhm. I guess I'm just looking at the notes in the grid, the exhibit A, and I'm curious, it doesn't give a lot of information about so the additional stop signs, but could it be, I guess, could we remove the 2 additional stop signs and have it be more broad? Because I think that if instead of like a traffic analysis, it could just be made more visually safer, because it just is like a lot of pavement. And so is there anything we can do that wouldn't change the traffic operations, but would maybe separate spaces more visibly? Just knowing that that is a really well-traveled path where there's a lot of people walking and biking. And so is there a way to, I guess, keep it on the radar because of that? Or is there a grouping of trails and pathway connections that we could add that to maybe that summary of locations to look at for connections for biking and walking? Or could we just make it a general just review layout? Because yeah.
I think those are good ideas. I think my personal recommendation is that this not be something that we push, that staff puts on the CIP list this budget cycle. And maybe we put this item on the agenda on the next meeting that we have and rehash it. I know this one came when we were still pretty young as a group. So I'm not sure that it was maybe discussed in the detail that we would do it if it was brought up today. And then we can have all these conversations about what could be done. I don't know. It doesn't feel like this is the appropriate time or place, since it's not really an agenda item, other than it's just something you're looking for the CIP budgeting process right now. And maybe a more comprehensive discussion about that intersection should come back up, so that we can, if we're not going to continue to stand by our recommendation that this be added to the CIP, we should open it back up and change that recommendation. And I'm not sure that I feel the same way as I did when we made that before. So I personally, I don't think I'm ready to recommend through a motion that we continue to ask you to put that on the CIP. But that's where I'm at.
Jason, are you saying for the 1-year CIP or the 5-year CIP, or both? Or
at this point, I would say both. I think that there's an opportunity next year's budgeting cycle to put it on the 5-year or the 1 year, in a year from now, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, so we do this every year.
So essentially what we're saying is we're not putting it on the 1 or 5 year this go around. There would be an opportunity to put it on the 1 or 5 year next year, which would be the 2 or the 6 year, I guess, if you look at it from today.
I guess I would move then, to table this line item at the Wildlife Haven and Railroad to a future meeting. So reopen the request and then remove it from our formal request to add to the CIP list for this year.
Okay. And I think that sounds like a very good and solid plan. What I envisioned initially is every year you guys would have a long list of things that you recommended be brought to the CIP, and you'd kind of have to hash out what you're like what priority and how you're recommending it. So kind of, I know this has been a little painful, but what you're doing is sort of what I envisioned, just a little, there's only a few projects, which is good. And I think, realizing that when you first had this conversation, maybe you didn't talk about it in the same way or think about it in the same way, I think is very fair and valid. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And frankly, I think if you're moving forward, really one recommendation strongly into the CIP, that's probably more likely to get incorporated into it than if you had 10 projects, because there's only so many things that we can add to the CIP anyway. So I think that's good.
Okay, can we consider what Lisa said there a motion? You feel like that was a motion, Lisa?
I thought it was pretty formal.
Yeah, okay. Anybody want to second that?
I'll second it.
All right. Any other thoughts or discussion before we vote? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
And any opposed? All right. Okay, well, so that'll get added then, I guess, to next month's agenda, and we can reopen this and have a bigger discussion, which I think will be good. I do think that it would be like next year when you're doing CIP planning, maybe we could try to have early enough in the process, like a meeting where we have an opportunity to review the CIP list. Because I think that this group could have an opinion on prioritization of lists of the list that's already together, even though they've not been related to agenda items that we've had. We can be a voice, I think, for the community as far as what we think from a safety perspective should be prioritized.
Yeah, we can certainly work on that. I mean, the challenge is, frankly, there's only so much money, and there's a lot of projects that are just currently underway, and so we're not really adding many new projects to certainly our 1-year CIP list. But certainly looking at, okay, here's the projects that are in the CIP. Here's what's on the 5-year CIP. Do you think any of them? I mean, I think, yeah, absolutely, we can have those conversations and do that earlier in the process.
Cool.
Jason,
right.
just a quick comment. In doing just a general search on the past of this grid, it looks like the CIP, any reference to the CIP really involves Sunset and Timbrel, that project that we just talked about with the stop signs, Sunset and Woodhaven, which really arguably could also almost be incorporated into the thought of Sunset and Timbrel because it's the next crosswalk and street thereafter. And then the only other reference was the Meineke project, which I believe is underway anyway, right? Is that the big 99 and Meineke project that's going on currently?
I'm not sure about that one.
It says on here, it's 20-009. So just as a side, those are the only references since the committee began, any references to CIP where we reference CIP.
Yeah, and the Meineke, the 2000 or 20-009, that project actually has been addressed. Public Works has done that project, is my understanding. So
yeah, so we'll move now. Then we'll first touch on the overall tracking list, but then the first item we'll touch on here is the update to the Sunset traffic counts, and we can address that particular issue item, and then right after that, we can circle back to the CIP list discussion and make a decision on how we want to word what we're recommending for if we want to recommend a study from, say, Pinehurst to 99 or something like that. Does that work for everybody? Okay, so moving then on to issues and complaints, is there anything on the tracking sheet that's not on the agenda that anybody has any questions or concerns they want to talk through? All right, so let's move on then, I guess, to the update on, I don't remember which one it is, 005 or 008, the one that has the traffic counts on Sunset.
Oh, wait.
Okay. So do we want a quick summary, or did everybody get a chance to look through the traffic counts? I think we're still waiting for head counts, right? This is just an update with vehicle counts.
It's just an update for vehicle counts and speed. Head counts, we don't have that ability to do it in-house. I wanted to see what we'd come up with speed counts, and we'll go from there. We'll probably do head counts at a couple different places that we need to deal with instead of just one or two at a time. So do you want me to go through the report, or does everybody have, has everybody read it? And do you have any questions about it? Or is it complete enough for you guys to say, yep?
So I was looking at it. So at Sunset, it's posted 35 miles per hour there.
Correct.
Okay, and is Sunset Boulevard 35 miles per hour the entire stretch?
I didn't run numbers all the way down. I only do
Yeah.
it once, which is
I'm
at
just
the
curious, if it changes or if it's
No,
35.
well, it does down at the school zone where it drops from 35
Mhm.
down to 25.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious, and I know speed limits aren't within the city of Sherwood's jurisdiction to change, but with Sunset with that specific stretch there being a pedestrian crossing used by school children, that it also be 20, what seems like it should be 25 miles per hour as well. Because for the speed study shows that, it looks like people are going the speed limit, but the speed limit itself, I think, is high.
School zones are only allowed within a certain distance of the school. State law prohibits that. So for it to be classified as a school zone with reduced speed, I'm not sure that I have a process for making it that way. Again, when we do that, we are going to petition the state to deal with some speeding issues on ED and Elwood. But even establishment of a school speed zone is still got to go through the state. So we abide by the rules and the regulations and the standards. This one is outside the distance or the radius from the school zone. So we probably would have to, number one, do something like this to say, this is in support of us getting a reduction in the school zone mixed with the PED count, shows that we have an issue here, that it's a safety issue relative to school children. So there's a way of getting around all that to tie the two reports together to make the application valid. Right now, you've got the report for the speed zone. And does that qualify? And I think there's a question about that the police have to answer. Is the data, and I think I have it in there as a discussion item, although you might have an older one by one. I had a discussion item that I added into it, and I'll quote it. It says, does the data result that 14.9% of the total traffic volume exceeds the 35-mile-an-hour speed limit, with 11.3% between 35 and 45 and 3.6% over 45 miles per hour, constitute a significant speeding issue that warrants additional measures, either an enhanced patrol efforts or an installation of traffic control devices, whatever those may be. So the first thing I have to ask, and I haven't gotten a clear response back from the PD. I was hoping they would be here tonight to sort of give me their voice in this, is in their viewpoint, based on the data that's been collected and presented, do they perceive a speeding issue, one where they would allocate resources, sufficient resources to make a big difference? I'm an engineer and an absolutist. Anything over 35 is speeding. That's just me. But I do recognize that typically there is a grace zone above which the police will not ticket you. And that's why I've got that zone of 0 to 10 miles over the posted speed limit. So anywhere from 35 to 45 becomes a police issue of, do they ticket, do they not ticket? Above that, they ticket. Because that's just, you know, sort of not good to even do that. That's just illegal. So there is a question, and I don't have the answer to it right now.
Yeah, I'd like to point out too in the study, which I thought was interesting and just kind of adds to the story, but that every hour out of the day, there's somebody speeding over 45 miles per hour, except for from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. So it makes the case that, yes, there are people, it might be a small percentage, but it's consistent throughout the day. There's consistently people going over 45 miles per hour, even though it may not be a large percentage. It's not that it's like only happening when it's off hours or in the middle of the night. It's,
From my the data that I read, it's basically consistent that you could go out there at any point in time within an hour, 1 hour time period, and somebody's going to go through that section at above 45 miles an hour. And that will occur from 4 o'clock in the morning to 2 o'clock in the morning.
yeah, so I guess that's the point where I feel like that seems like a safety concern, because it's high speeds consistently throughout the day, even though it's a small amount.
Now, I will say that where I placed the counter and where the crossing is, I would say that there are some physical limitations that warrant a little bit more stricter review of that, and maybe saying that we do need to do something there, because it's on a corner, and sight distance wise, it's not the best in the world with the street trees and everything like that, the high speed. If somebody was to basically go out and step into the road at 35 miles an hour, I would say that a driver would be most likely able to stop. At 45, it'd be a lot more difficult. And above that, you're going to have somebody fly over the hood. And that's my concern, is because it's on a corner. You can't see this from a great distance away. It has some characteristics, actual physical characteristics that I'm not comfortable with. And that weighs in on my opinion that, you know, based on counts, if they say that 10 miles, up to 10 miles over the speed limit is acceptable, I would say I'm not as comfortable with that based on the physical conditions. And I would say a lower speed needs to be maintained through that section, just because the potential for accident, injury, fatality increases with speed. And the corner makes it even worse. There's not that reaction time allowance that you get with a longer distance of visual corridor. Now, there, the school signage, there is school zone signage and lighting, and I think I've got pictures of that. In the westbound direction, the lighting, the lighted sign shows up for the school zone when it's in session, when crossing is actually occurring, and they have signage there. In the eastbound direction, there's only the sign at the crossing. There's no signage up the road that I could discern that shows that there's a school crossing. And it's like you only got half the signage done. So if anything,
I think it's way back at the YMCA.
it possibly could be.
Yeah.
I'm thinking we need to do something with bringing that signage, bracketing it a lot closer, or adding signage a lot closer to the ped crossing rather than trying to wait. You know, remember that you just got off the highway, you're trying to merge, and you're not looking at the signs. You're looking at other cars trying to make sure that you have room to get in behind and merge with them. So if anything, what I would do is I would, at a minimum, recommend that we look at the signage and maybe add more signage of the ped crossing that will allow us to, basically warn people better, closer, more intently. And I, again, my opinion is that the speed for the condition is too high. But again, I think the police will have to do something with that. And that's a enhanced patrol situation. Would a signalized crossing benefit anyone? With the amount of signage we have going on and the amount of speeding that's going through there, people are ignoring it anyway, even though it's existing. I would say that a ped crossing, signalized one, it's a two-edged sword. Gives a false sense of security for the people who push the button and step out immediately into the street. Given the speeds that are going through there, if we do not change that speed factor, they push the button, step out in the street, they're still going to get the possibility of getting hit. So I think we have to attack it from a couple of different perspectives. Am I opposed to the RRFB as at this point? I'm not opposed to it, but I don't think that it's a standalone. I think we have to go a little bit further. And I do believe driver modification, behavior modification, education has to go along with it.
I'm curious, I put in the chat, I was on vacation and saw similar in the median at Trimble and Sunset, there's, it's state law, stop here for folks in the crosswalk. But they placed it in between lanes in the crosswalk. And so in the chat, I put a link to a Google view of what they did in Palm Springs, but it seems that, it visually and physically constrains it. So it, like, as a driver, I drove through that intersection, you've just automatically slowed down because it's such a wide intersection. And I know it could be a maintenance issue because it's posts in the roadway that potentially will likely get hit and have to be continued to be maintained, but it's a physical barrier that, like I said, it just makes it feel narrower. It will make it narrower for the cars and or vehicles traveling. And so I think would be a good speed deterrent and make the crossing more visible without a high cost.
Part of the problem, I think, is that crosswalk crosses at a diagonal across through the intersection. So if you put something in the crosswalk, it's actually in the middle of the intersection. Mm-hmm. I think that's part of the problem there. I think there's lots of problems there personally that need to be addressed. But kind of circling back to some of the previous conversations we're having, I think there's a bigger comprehensive solution in the area that needs to be addressed. And I think that the regional study from Pinehurst to 99 could be a really good solution. Initially Bob, you were talking about speed, and that's what the update really is about, the speeds through the area. And I think that's really helpful to see that, but the issue at hand is the safety of the pedestrian crossing, which speed is a factor, but those speeds that you presented aren't out of the normal for what you would see for a 35-mile-an-hour street. So I think that there's a pedestrian crossing issue that needs to be addressed. And I think the appropriate solution is to do a more comprehensive look at the region through here. And I think you brought up really good points also, Bob, about if there's a lack of signage, that's something that, that's a good idea. We could address that now. And that's a low cost thing that should be done anyways. That I don't think we looked at that previously, because I don't know that, it just wasn't, it wasn't known. So that's now a known issue that we can deal with. That's not like a big CIP project thing. That seems like a good thing we could do.
I think there's a combination of things that we can do, low cost things that we can do right now to improve the situation without having to do a reconfiguration of the whole intersection. I do believe signage is one of those things. Get some more advanced signage out there, and get it in a zone that you can actually see the signage and the crossing at the same point in time. Like I said, going westbound, I think it's pretty evident what's going on. Eastbound, I have a problem with it just because it's so far away. I think that, anything that highlights the crossing is a good idea. And I also think that we need to do something to adjust drivers' habits to going through there. I don't think there's anything that we can do that will stop somebody from speeding. Lanes are single lane down there. They're about 12 feet wide. It's already tight, what can I say? I think most of these are local residents who are driving to and from wherever they're going. Just because of the numbers that I see, it's too consistent throughout the day, especially late at night. Commute time's over. So the people who are speeding at night, basically going from home to whatever thing they're doing or coming back from. So how do we educate them? If they're unwilling to abide by our laws and safe driving requirements, well, it's a package deal. We have to educate them, and sometimes forced education comes at a price tag that they're going to have to pay. So part of whatever we do with physical changes, such as signage, striping, lighting, whatever comes up, has to be augmented with police activity that forces people to understand that you're doing something wrong here, and it's going to cost you some money.
Bob, is this a street that may warrant speed bumps?
No, it's an arterial. And I would suggest that given 35 miles an hour, you put a speed cushion in there, you're probably going to launch people, particularly in the corners and things like that. That is not what that should be used for, really. That's the wrong type of speed control device to use on that particular stretch of road.
Are you thinking, Bob, that when the school zone beacons are on and that one heading eastbound is so far away up by 99, are you thinking that sign needs to be moved up or a supplemental one put in to remind people that yes, they are still in an active 20-mile-an-hour school zone when the lights are on?
I think more signage in between. I'm not opposed to more signage so long as it's spaced out correctly. I think what we have right now is where the eastbound sign is located. Like I said, people are coming off of Highway 99, and there's two. It's a dual lane turn, and they're merging. They're not looking at the signage. They're looking at the other cars to determine whether or not they've got room and speed to make that merge without getting, fender bendered. So I would suggest that more signage be placed a little bit closer when the lanes have fully merged and we now have their attention on driving down the road. Their eyeballs are stuck to the road instead of trying to wiggle around, seeing other cars on their side, you know, what they're doing. So I'm going to look at that as the first thing that I would look at as being one item that we need to address and get on there.
Well, it would certainly help too if those school beacons were a little more up to date. They already have 120 volts, so that helps. But if they had dual 12-inch flashing heads versus a single 8-inch, they're going to be a lot more visible, even when the merging happens.
I don't disagree with using the most up-to-date stuff that we could get.
And I don't think that would be a huge cost as far as things go when you're, you know, essentially the infrastructure's there already. You're just upgrading the heads.
Right. It's not like the RRFBs, which are linked and everything else with the push that starts to get up there.
Another thing that could be a possibility is a permanent radar speed sign somewhere along that stretch as well, just to kind of remind people how fast they're going. I don't know how effective it is, but they're all over the place. And you know, when you can set it to whatever you want at 36 miles an hour, it can start flashing at you to slow down.
I think that might be a good item, but again, it's a two-edged sword. Eventually, people get used to it and they ignore it after that. So it's a matter of, you know, somebody who keeps going down this road year after year after year, it won't make an impression on them. They're not going to see it after a while. So how do we get them to notice it every time? How do we do all that? I don't think it's a bad thing to do. I think it's a cost-effective methodology to put into place. I'm just trying to figure out how to make it permanent. And maybe my wish is it'd be permanent. You know, we catch their attention and it's caught forever. But that's not realistic, right? You know,
So
I think it's a cost-effective method.
I think that's a great recommendation as well. I feel like similar to the one on Sherwood Boulevard where there's the speed reader underneath the school speed zone sign. It really is a very clear reminder. And I'm also curious, so the speed limit drops to 20 during school hours. Does that mean that, so there is a speeding issue then during the school zone hours if folks are still traveling 35 miles per hour then?
Well, the speed zone, the school hour is probably just like a 45-minute period in the day, in the morning, and another 45 minutes in the afternoon. And they have flaggers out there from the school that get kids across. If the flagger's there, then the school zone's in play, and they usually don't have a problem. I haven't heard about any real problems from the police department. They have no accident injury data that shows a pedestrian involvement in any at that point ever. They've had a couple of car accidents where somebody's been hurt, but that was the driver.
Yeah, I guess if we look at the time of day though for the speed profile at the school zones, is it still showing speeds at 35 miles per hour though, even though it's a 20 mile per hour during that time?
Again, it's only during the active time. So the lights are on for 30, 40 minutes and then they shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So during that active time, I would have to go back into the data to see what is actually going on at the time when the crossing guards are out there to see if the count data shows up. But I'm using 1 hour increments right now. So that's kind of difficult because I'd have to break it down into like 5 or 10 minute segments within that hour to get a proper reading of when did the speeder essentially go through this zone, and does it correlate to that 15 to 20 minute period or 30 minute period when the flagger was out there. Right now, I don't have that.
So
my time sets are, 1 hour increments right now.
So in the interest of time, because we do have a number of agenda items tonight that we'd like to get to, a couple of new ones as well. Does anybody, do you guys feel like we can make a recommendation to kind of keep this moving forward? Does anybody want to take a stab at something like that? Or, I mean, if we need to keep hashing it out, that's fine.
I might recommend that you wait until you get to hear from the police department. Right now, all I've given you.
Bob, they're here. Ty and John are here. They're just not visible.
Well, I would say let's hear from them what they want to do with that.
This is John here. We have done extra patrols. I don't have those stats in front of me, so I can't comment on the citations or anything like that. Bob's correct, though. There was only, I did a 10-year looking back at crashes, and there was only 2 that I could find. And those were single vehicle crashes into like a tree. There's no ped crashes that I could find in that intersection. Looking at the data itself, if it was a regular road with no school crossing there, I would say there's not really a speeding issue. I look at basically 10 over. That's where we kind of draw the line. And I believe that was 3.6% of vehicles. So again, if that was just a regular road, I would say there's no issue there. Being so that there's a crosswalk there with school age kids crossing there, 45 is pretty excessive. Again, I think what we say about approximately 1 car an hour. Enforcement of it, I mean, realistically, we're not going to go out there unless it's 20 and they're going, over that speed. But on a regular 35-mile-an-hour roadway, if they're going 40, we're not going to cite. I mean, that's just the reality. Again, if it's in that time frame where the lights are flashing and it's 20 and they're going above 20, then, that's a different story. We can cite and we should be citing. That's kind of my perspective on that.
And that's John and I, Captain Carlson and I did discuss that. And the only thing that I brought up was the percentage, 3.6% is kind of you have to look at it as, but the volume of the road is 39,000 vehicles in that 7-day period. So 3.6% of that is 1,400 cars over that 7-day period that we're doing over 45. And when you say, well, it's 3.6%, it's not a not very large number percentage wise. When you start talking high volumes, 1,400 cars is what that 3.6% represents. And the question I have is does that 1,400 vehicles represent a significant number relative to the overall traffic count that you feel that it's indicative of something that should be dealt with? And that's where I get stuck.
I guess I'll chime in here real quick. Yeah, 1,400 is, it seems like a significant number, Bob. The battle is, and the balance is allocating our resources. And that will and always will be the challenge for these issues. And so, I mean, we have traffic studies out all over the city, and it's trying to prioritize where these are at. And it's, speeding. And I agree with Bob. I mean, we don't want anybody speeding in the cities, especially in the school zones or where they put anybody in danger. And we can, as we have since I've been in this city, we put out the radar trailers and we put out extra patrols, and it does have that impact temporarily, and then we need to move on. And so I don't know. I mean, I don't have the answer other than I do recognize that it certainly can be alarming when you see these kind of numbers. But it's not a drum I like to beat, but the fact is our minimums are 2 people working at a time. And so for me to say I need 2 people within the city to go and allocate or spend time in these areas sometimes isn't realistic, because there's calls for service that we're responding to. Now, there are times where we have 3 or 4, and of course we're going to utilize them. And we do have a dedicated traffic safety or a traffic officer that moves from zone to zone specifically to deal with these things. So I don't want you to think by any means that we're ignoring this or we take it lightly. It's just, it's always just going to be that juggling act. And so this is why I appreciate all of you looking at this through a different set of lenses and trying to give us direction of how we can best, attack it. And whether it's through signage and whether it's through enforcement or a combination thereof, I'm all ears. So I'm happy to hear it. I know Captain Carlson is, and trying to, move forward in a positive way is what we're here for. So I guess that's my 2 cents, and I appreciate always the info and the perspectives. And I don't know if you have anything else to jump in there with, John.
No, I think you said it well.
And thanks for the input. I'd like to see staff look at signage improvements through that area. And I'd like to see staff try to advance a broader study from Pinehurst to 99 to the CIP list for next year. And I feel like those are the appropriate steps at this point.
Hey, Bob, real quick, what was the number again? The total count, 39,000?
Hang on a second. Total count that we got, and this is both lanes, was, let me find it. Where is it? Now that I'm looking for it, I can't see it. Figures.
I think it's somewhere in there.
I think it was
I only
39.
asked that is because there was concern or question as to whether the 12th and Sherwood construction was impacting those numbers. And I don't think they are, because we haven't really seen construction on there that has impacted it. That may change, but right now, 12th and Sherwood's pretty open still. So
Yeah, no, 39,328 vehicles over a 7-day period on an arterial is what I would expect. It's about 5,000 cars a day. That's about right.
Thanks, Bob.
Anybody like to make a motion or have other comments?
I'll move to have the city review signage options and then also move that we add the study for sunset to the CIP list for traffic analysis.
Anybody want a second?
I'll second.
Is that motion clear enough for both you, Bob, on the sign side and Julie on the CIP side?
It is for me on the CIP side, absolutely.
All right.
And I think on the sign, my understanding is that's something that Captain Carlson forwards to the city manager. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, any discussion before we vote? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? None? All right. Thank you. I think that took care of the CIP one as well, Julia. So,
Yes, thank you.
and that was that one 005 or 008?
That was
I believe it was
all-
08.
Okay, so now we can move on to 005. Which I believe is the other one we got traffic counts on, Old Highway 99 and Crooked River Lane.
Yes,
So just to kind of help kick this one off, because just in the interest of time. So we're still waiting on ped counts. And so this is kind of just an interim update with the speed counts. So if anybody feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the outcome for tonight is we're still pending all the data to be able to fully evaluate this and provide a recommendation. So I guess maybe, unless I'm understanding this incorrectly, maybe we could try to keep this one a little bit more brief. Anybody wants to add insight or thoughts or comments or modify what we're asking to have done before we can really fully evaluate this? I think let's focus on those things. Or Bob, if you have any specific items that you want to point out from the information that you learned that you'd like us to discuss and provide any feedback on.
I think the only thing that I want to point out is, comparatively speaking, Old Highway 99, the volume of the traffic through there is what I would expect for a residential road. It's fairly low. So when you're talking about, in this case, when I say that 2.4% of the total traffic count exceeds the speed limit by 10 or more miles per hour, you start getting very low traffic counts. My only concern is that the speeding, as the data reports shows, that even if it's a school zone and it's permanently signed, you're supposed to do this amount of speed through that school zone, people are still blowing through there. That's about the only thing that I can see. The ped crossing is well signed, it's well identified, it's striped accordingly. It does go a little diagonally, but not significantly. It's just basically, if people are going through there, they're driving a little fast for a school zone in a residential zone after that. And I think it's mostly local people who are doing it. So do I have a recommendation? No, I don't have a recommendation. The signage is very, it's well done for that area, both going northbound and southbound on Old Highway 99 from the school. It's well signed. So there's no added signage that needs to be done that would identify it. And typically we don't use stop signs to control speed. We use stop signs to control access onto the roadway. In this case, Old Highway 99 is a through road, and Crooked River Lane actually tees into it. And people who are on Crooked River Lane are supposed to stop before entering the roadway. It's a T intersection. So, if there's an accident, the people on Crooked River, Lane, if they're moving out in front of somebody, they're probably at fault because they didn't stop. So I wouldn't recommend additional stop signage down there. Otherwise, we're going to be going through the entire city doing that. So I have a little bit more of a problem with this one because I believe that the signage is adequate for the school zone and for the crossing.
I think it's good info. I think the only comment I had was that it looks like if you had the staff availability and you could set up an officer there from about 4 to 7, you pretty highly likely going to catch that 1 or 2 or 3 people that are speeding. every day.
So Bob, do you feel that is local residents in that local area that are doing the speeding that?
Oh, yeah, that is not a commuter route. When I talk about commuter, I talk about regional commuters. Local commuters, that's local people. They're going from their home to wherever they're working locally. It's all local. There's no connectivity that would be regional in the fact that it's coming from Newburgh going towards Wilsonville or Beaverton or Tiger or Hillsborough. There's no reason for that. So this is all the local people basically dealing and, driving down the road, going to work, coming home from work, traveling there, and they're just speeding through their local neighborhood.
And our ped count still something that will eventually be done here.
Yes.
Okay.
I was waiting for one other traffic count analysis, and that's the one up by Copper Terrace. I want to include that in the ped count as well. But that comes with my analysis for Edie Road, which has not been released as of yet.
For
Yeah.
for this location, I was just in Google Maps. It doesn't look like it has a school speed zone signed, but it's 25 miles per hour. So is
Going
that
northbound, it does. As you're entering from southbound going northbound, there is.
oh,
And then going around the school, you're basically coming in at an intersection, and the school's right there.
yeah. I guess, is there the signage seems sufficient. You had said the visibility looks good. The only concern is it's the only accessible route south of the school. You don't have another route until you're, at the north edge at the stop controlled intersection. I'm curious if there is similar to what maybe was discussed at Trimble, just to slow folks down, is if we put additional signage there, even though it is local. And I don't know if this is if the city or it's also another diagonal crossing. So I don't know if this would work also, but putting those, school zone crossing signs in the roadway or anything to narrow that, that roadway. It's pretty long and wide.
Didn't that particular area get an update of signage in the recent last couple of years? It feels like on that crosswalk that there potentially even is one in the roadway. Was there that?
I believe there is one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there is a flashing signage as you come into the city.
Yeah. Coming from the south, there is a flashing school zone,
Okay.
speed zone sign. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. I'm just looking at Google Maps and it's not updated there. So that seems sufficient then.
So I think the plan is to have a more comprehensive discussion between speeding issues and pedestrian crossing safety once the pedestrian counts come back in.
Yeah. I
So
think that's appropriate. Because if we're going to do it, I think that we have identified several different areas that if there's an issue, we deal with all of them at the same time.
so with that, if you guys are okay, we'll just move on to our next agenda item unless anybody else has anything else they want to add on this one. And thanks, Bob, for bringing the data. It's always good to look at that.
You start with data and work your way up from there.
All right, so we've got a handful of items here. Captain Carlson, for updates, if you have any 006, 01, 22, 01, 02, and 03. So this would probably be a good time to go through those if you have updates?
Sure. So 21006, that has been approved and we're just waiting a timeline and better weather for him to do the striping and painting. So 22001, that was recommended to do some extra patrol in that area. We did a focus patrol from January 13th to March 15th. The officers spent approximately 4.6 hours. That's roughly 278 minutes at that intersection. They observed 0 violations. The violations they're looking for are cars failing to stop for pedestrians in a crosswalk and cars running that stop sign at that intersection. They also noted on their sheets that they only observed 3 to 4 kids walking to school each day at that intersection. So that was the update on the focus patrol that you guys recommended in our past meeting. And I believe that was recommended from the city. So I don't know if we want to talk more about that.
Sure. Sounds like it might be one that doesn't have much of an issue. Maybe we can consider closing that one with no action. Agree, disagree, think otherwise, have thoughts.
Well, I wonder if Captain Carlson's referencing that since it was a request by the city manager, do we need to do any kind of formal response to them of our findings before closing it?
Well, based on your recommendation, I can shoot him a memo and let them know what we agreed on.
I think it came from a citizen through the city manager, if I remember right.
Correct.
I'd be comfortable closing this one with no action.
Well,
What was that?
Yeah.
I said I would as well.
Okay.
Let's make a motion to close 2022-001.
Second.
I'll second.
All right. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 And any opposed? None? All right. And one more before we go to the new one.
So, yeah, 2022-2 and 2022-3. I really have nothing to report at this time. We're still gathering data. So it'd be premature for me to give anything out right this time.
All right, so let's move on to the first new item, 2022-004, turn lanes at Walmart, main entrance and exit. You know, if Captain Carlson or Bob, if one of you wants to give a brief summary, and I don't know if you guys have any initial recommendations.
Trying to find it. I know there was a couple crashes at that intersection. There was one ped fatal at that intersection a couple years ago. I'm trying to find it right now. I might not have. But we've got a couple different complaints regarding that intersection. I don't have the actual complaint in front of me.
So the request was to restrict the through movement from Target to Walmart and vice versa. Potentially restricting left turns. Concerns over people stopping when there's no one in the crosswalk, or just stopping to let someone turn. I think there's a lot of confusion in general there.
And if I may, and Bob can fill in more, the RRFB signal that I believe, and Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's the crosswalk and the RRFB and the signs that said stop here when a pedestrian's in the crosswalk. That was installed after that pedestrian fatality, in part, based on council direction in response to that pedestrian fatality. Bob, is my timing on that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Is there currently any other plans to do further improvements to this intersection down the road?
No. We've looked at it. We've had it analyzed several different ways. We've thought about, how do we deal with this intersection? Proximity wise, it's really close to the highway. So we can't signalize it because traffic will back up onto the highway, TS Road. So that doesn't work. Restricting right in, right out. It's an option, but that's going to have a lot of pushback from the businesses and the drivers who, basically come in from both directions, and they want to leave and go back into town. And you got this nice big wide road and multiple lanes, and they can't do it. They have to go back out to the highway and then drive clear down to Oregon street intersection, or they have to drive up to the next thing at Baylor. That will cause nothing but grief and anxiety on a very large scale from the public. So as far as the cross traffic goes, I wish we could just take there's a lot of problems with it. I agree. And a lot of it comes from that the through traffic, the people who are going through traffic to go to the Kmart shopping center are part of they're sitting alongside another car that's going to be turning left to go up Langer Drive. And they pop out because they're in a hurry and they want to get across the road, and they haven't got good sight distance because of the car next to them. A lot of that is, again, driver habit and not obeying what is typically the standards. I will admit that the crosswalk makes it difficult for people who are not used to having the flashing thing. But basically, if they remember that a person who is in a crosswalk has the right of way and you have to stop for them no matter what, whether it's signed or not, we'd be in a lot better position to say, yeah, great, it works. The confusion comes from people not knowing that if there's nobody in the crosswalk, then you're free to go through it. You don't have to stop for it. Obey the laws as they're written. So there's complaints in both ways that I just sit there and I have to shrug my shoulders at and say, okay, reread the driver manual. I'm being a little blunt here, and I apologize for that. I'm not known for my timidity around making an idiot of myself in front of the public. But, if you've got that end of the thing, that end of a problem squared away, in other words, they're following the basic traffic rules and laws that we know work, then it comes down to what's the physical structure like that's causing the problem, and I can do something at that point. I don't think this is one of those things. I don't think it's a physical structure item. that's causing this problem. As much of it is driver habit. And how do I get around doing that? I don't think it's feasible to say that we will to make that into a right in, right out into the major entryway into a shopping area as a right in, right out. That's just not going to happen politically or economically or whatever. It's already been analyzed several times. And it fits the criteria, the design criteria. We can't turn it into a signalized intersection because it's too close to TS road signal. We know that. So I'm sort of at a loss on this one.
Hey, Jason, I'll jump in real quick.
Sure.
Having driven that and drive that every day, you do see the challenges, and it's I equate it to the roundabouts in some way. Some people get confused because there's a stripe that comes across the road there and they're not sure whether they should stop before they turn into Walmart. I don't remember, and maybe John can correct me if I'm wrong, of anybody or having any crashes where we had cross crashes. That fatality was a result of traveling down Langer and a pedestrian going across the road. But I can't recall, and granted, I don't hear every crash, but I don't know of anybody passing from Target to Walmart and getting T-boned or T-boning somebody. And it may have occurred, but it is very rare. And I'm going to go back and piggyback on Bob saying this is all driver. It's driver habit, and there's just no way of winning this one, because you cannot force one way in and one way out on that thing. Otherwise, you're going to go. We try and enforce something like that. We're going to go to the other end of Target at Baylor and try and enforce the same thing there, because it's the same thing coming off of Century there, or not Century, but Baylor. And people shoot across into that side of Target parking lot all the time, and vice versa. So and for us to enforce it is impossible. There's nowhere for us to sit. Whether or not, I don't even know what we try to enforce there. It's not necessarily a speeding issue. It would be quite the challenge. I get the frustration. I've seen the frustration. I've been frustrated with kind of what drivers are doing. The one thing I do like is that obnoxious flashing crosswalk signal. It startles me every time that thing goes off. I think somebody mentioned it, about having on other roads. You want to talk about getting people's attention. It gets my attention because I'm usually rolling through there at 5:45 in the morning, and that thing scares me. So I pay attention when that thing starts flashing. But aside from that, I don't know what the answer would be to that, short of just continuing to educate as best we can.
Bob, has there been any formal things put together as far as what you've looked at there or had people look at that maybe we could just postpone the discussion to next meeting and that can be provided for us to just look through and come with some thoughts next time?
I could go back into the project files and look at the transportation analysis that we did for it to determine how the crosswalk would be put in and what the conditions were around that. Yeah.
I'd like to see that, and I'd like to see, I don't know if this is digging too far back, but maybe even the traffic analysis done for the development that went in there. I don't know, just some data, and maybe we revisit this next month.
Okay. I'll look into it and see what it is. It's part of the land use decision for that, but we tend to keep all the traffic analysis, geotech reports, stormwater analysis for all these private development projects on file permanently. So I think we might have something in there. I will go back and look at it. And I can guarantee you it's a huge file because so
and maybe it's not relevant. I think this is something that warrants looking at a little closer. And if there's been some stuff done in the past, it'd be nice to look at that before we really kind of dive into it.
Well, we wouldn't have put in the crosswalk unless we had actually done the analysis to show that it was going to be done properly. But as far as having the entryway located where it is, we'll go back to the original report on it, and I'm pretty sure that we'll find that it was designed to all the standards, to meet all the standards. But I can make that available to you, and that's fine. I think that's always good to have a lot of different eyes on something to say, well, maybe it wasn't designed accordingly. But I think we've hit it several times because of the accident that occurred to know what we're doing with that, and that the conditions and the requirements haven't significantly changed for that. Some of them have changed for the roundabout, but not for intersection spacing standards, sight distance standards, speed standards, stopping sight distance, ped crossing mid-block, this is really, I consider this a mid-block ped crossing. Just because a driveway is next to it doesn't make it an intersection, even if the drivers treat it as an intersection. And that's part of the problem with this whole thing. It's not an intersection, shouldn't be treated as such. But
So
I'll get it.
Are the rest of you guys okay with that? If we just postpone this to next month and see what kind of, background data we can look at ahead of the next meeting?
Be fine.
Okay, any last comments on this one? I don't want to neglect, we've gotten several comments or issues on the same thing for the last one, and we're kind of out of time, but I want to try and hit on it for a few minutes, if that's okay with you guys. All right, so Captain, the last one, maybe we could just take 5 minutes. We may not come to any sort of resolution on it, but because we had so many specific requests and because of the recent accident there, maybe we could spend 5 minutes and talk about the Edie Road one.
Yeah, so we've had a lot of input by citizens in the last month or so regarding this roadway, which resulted in 3 requests. That's 2022-005.1, 0.2, and 0.3. And basically they're requesting to reduce the speeds of Edie Road, add crosswalks and sidewalks, and add additional lighting for visibility.
So this was mentioned earlier. It sounds like something's maybe in the works. Bob, I think maybe you mentioned something about it. I can't remember.
Yeah, Bob is putting together a traffic study, but that's not completed yet. So hopefully by next meeting, we'll have more data on that we can give you.
Yeah, and that's strictly traffic volume and speed count data. That's the first step. About the only other thing is that information will be used to present a request to Washington County to submit a request to the state of Oregon for a speed study, hopefully resulting in a speed limit reduction. But again, there's processes that we have to do, and it's a multi-step process, and it does take significant amount of time. And the data that we have right now has not been completely vetted. And once it is, then we can release it and utilize it. But until I get that vetting done, I can't say that I'm actually moving forward at light speed to get everything running. But I am working concurrently with everything to try and move it forward in a timely fashion.
And I'd also like to add, we are talking, so the county has a program called MISTIP. It's Major Streets Transportation Improvement Program. Part of your taxes go towards this program. And it funds major major streets, transportation improvements in Washington County. So the Tualatin Sherwood Road widening project is being funded through the MISTIP funds. The Kruger Elwart realignment was funded in part through MISTIP funds. And they have cycles. They're just going to be beginning their next cycle. They're beginning to solicit requests from cities within Washington County. And that is likely to be one of the projects that we put forward. It is competitively reviewed and evaluated. So, we don't know what will happen, but it would be a road improvement project, sidewalk improvement project along Edie Road. So more to come on that, but I just wanted to let you guys know that in addition to that piece that Bob is exploring with the speed reductions and the traffic counts, that is something that we're talking about.
Thank you. So it sounds like maybe this is one we'll just hold over till next month. Does anybody else have anything that they want to add or comment on before we close out for the night?
Yeah, I'd like to ask the captain, is there any news on what, caused that accident, how it happened, other than what was put out there the first few days?
Nothing new yet. They're still investigating it, and it's going to be several months before the final report's completed. So we're still waiting.
Hey, Tony, and actually all of you, just for clarification on that, Captain Carlson's correct. It's going to be some time, probably a couple months out. I will tell you that they're exhausting everything within that as far as evidence is concerned. And so it just takes some time. There's a lot of electronic data. There's a lot of things that they're looking at. And I think you were told that CART came out, the crash analysis reconstruction team of Washington County. So unfortunately, it takes some time. I will tell you that the district attorney who is reviewing this case is in contact with both the families. And so anything that is relevant, they're being updated on it. They're not being left out there wondering as to where things are at. It's just, I know the DA he wants everything in before he makes a determination on this crash. So rather than try and just spit things out periodically, he's kind of holding everything tight to his vest, and myself included. I don't know. I just know that they're waiting. So, but last I heard, probably 2 months, and I know that's frustrating. I wish we had more answers, but that's just where we're at right now.
Edie Road is a problem on, you're coming from a major highway, Sherwood City, and then you're going on a country road, basically. It's just a few neighborhoods in between. And that's the problem.
All right, well, we look forward to hearing more when you get more. We'll talk more about it next month. We're kind of out of time, but does anybody have any committee comments? Off agenda stuff?
I had a question for Julia on the MSTIP application. What's the schedule for that? For the funding and the application?
So they're going to be soliciting projects in April. And Bob, help me out. I don't know when they actually, it's a several month process before they, for them to evaluate, and then there's public input, and then there's evaluation, and ultimately it's decided by the Board of County Commissioners. The funding would not be available until at the earliest 2023. I think it's 2023 to 2025 or 26 is the cycle. Bob, do you know more?
It's a 23 to 25.
Okay.
And it will take about a full year before we get any type. It has to go through several committees. Evaluation, the WAC-TAC has to approve it.
Washington County Coordinating Committee, Transportation Advisory Committee.
And then it goes to the WAC, which is the parent body, which is all the elected officials who vote on it, stuff like that, and commissioners. And that's a long process. So I think they're trying to do it faster this time around than they've done in the past.
Mhm.
But again, the final allocation won't be made available until fiscal year 23 and then on from there.
And do you have the limits of the application that you're planning on submitting? Yeah, or
Not at this time, no. But actually, it's very likely that we will, I just thought about this as I was telling you guys about this, but we may ask for a letter of support from this committee. I think that would be probably a good demonstration if you guys support that. So we'll be able to have more information for you by the next meeting. In fact, I think our application will be due by then. So we'll have more information for you then.
thank you.
Mhm.
All right. I don't think there's any citizen comment. Is that correct, Angie?
Yes, that is correct. We do not have one tonight.
All right. Well, we used our full time tonight. That was just good to have good dialogue. I appreciate all of you guys chiming in and participating. It was good. And with that, we'll adjourn. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Jason.
Great,
Good
thank you,
night.
everyone.
Take care.